Welcome to NTR Radio. I'm Tom Force Anubis.
And I'm VZ Mark II.
It's just the two of us today for this out
Just
of
the
cycle
two,
NTR Radio.
just the two of us making castles in the sky. Well, you said okay. Yeah, this was a sort of thing that I wanted to personally talk about that K-Gods wasn't interested in discussion, and that's fine.
And
Because
it's kind of a hot topic that a lot of people are talking about, and in my opinion, a lot of the people are getting like half of an idea about. Like they're not necessarily getting the wrong idea, but they're not getting all the way there.
yeah. So basically, the topic is this. Uh, Western media is, for all intents and purposes, dying.
Yeah,
And
so and this is kind of predicated on the whole discussion about how like it came out a few weeks ago that if you look at all of the top selling books in like the comics category, it's basically all manga volumes. There are no American comic books in the top like 20 or so selling comics in the US.
yeah, yeah, it's manga's been doing very well, extremely well, even during the pandemic. And there's been actually a shortage of
Yep,
manga that I've heard
yep.
because due to the pandemic, obviously people want things to read, but there's not as much printers going.
The
I'm
market
sure
can't
things
keep
will
up with
slow.
demand. And
Yeah,
guaranteed that that's not going to be forever, but
nah, no.
there the fact is that there was an increased demand during the pandemic where people are at home bored, so they're going out and buying manga. Well, they're ordering mangas was really happening,
Yeah,
and and so there was that, and also just as a market, manga has really expanded over the course of the past several years. I remember I remember when manga sections in bookstores were shrinking.
yeah, I
And
remember
now
that too. I
like
remember.
now I go to the bookstore and not only is has the manga section doubled over the past like half year, but there's so much manga that the manga section is now taking up like 3 shelves worth of the graphic novel section. So the graphic
Yeah,
novel section can't even fill out the graphic novel section. They put manga there instead. And of course, that's anecdotal. That's only my own bookstore, but I've seen people corroborating that with videos of their own bookstores, where the graphic novel section is like two two big shelves, and then the manga section is like seven, 7 or 8.
meanwhile, Western comic books, uh, they can't give the stuff away. It's literally toilet paper at this point.
As I understand it, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, new comic books are among the least popular items at comic book stores currently.
Yeah, yeah. People back issue stuff will always be a sort of thing,
Yeah,
but nobody's just interested in uh, the new stuff coming out. And if you take a look, it's abominable level of like just like you go that you really thought people were going to buy this. You really uh and yeah, I heard they're doing a Black Superman now.
yeah, and so
Which again, I don't want this to be about. I don't want this to be about a sort of the woke thing, or the it's actually it's only a symptom, if anything.
exactly. So this
Like you said,
this is where a lot of people are getting it wrong, because there definitely is a paradigm going on in Western comics where they're trying to do a whole lot of political stuff, and people definitely aren't liking that. But a lot of the people talking about this issue are focusing on that when in reality the only that's not the root cause. There are elements of the business model behind American comics that don't exist in the manga industry that allow American comics to do the political thing, even though it causes people, even though it alienates people who would otherwise be reading American comics.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. If you look at like what's been selling for manga, the most it's shown in action.
Yeah,
It's stuff that what we're seeing is a sort of uh fulfillment of what's lacking in the Western comic book. They're not getting what because superhero. It's not that people don't want superheroes anymore. They just don't want what the Western comic book has been doing.
well, yeah, if you look at Hollywood, people definitely want superheroes.
Okay, yeah,
Marvel
well,
movies
well,
are some of the highest grossing films ever. So people definitely want superheroes, but what they don't want what the Western comic book industry has been putting out,
yeah,
and
that's
that's the
exactly.
problem.
But yeah, I should have clarified it because superheroes are very popular for movies right now.
Well, no,
But
you're definitely correct. It's what's going on particularly in comic books that's the problem. And again, people focus on the politics, but really it's a business model problem. And that's that's been kind of my focus on it.
and I just want people to know who think I might be sort of um, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't read. Well, I okay. I wasn't really a Western comic book buyer in the '90s, but I did buy the Transformers comics in the '90s. But also, I used to watch a bunch of the superhero cartoons that were out at that time. Because like the Batman the animated
Yep.
series was the big one, but also uh,
I mean, I remember that.
the X Men cartoon. What?
I remember Batman the animated series, Batman Beyond. I remember Static Shock.
Yeah. Oh, I really like the Batman Beyond. Actually, the X Men cartoon.
Yep.
I also liked which is funny. Nobody talks about it anymore. The '90s Spider Man cartoon.
Mm,
Even though like you watch it today and it there's like no time. There's no concept of like um having things be at rest because it's like this thing and then this thing and then this thing and then this thing. It's like no concept of like just uh when you want something to just breathe or
right.
taking in the scenery.
Right. Right. And so like I was never a follower of the comic of like superhero comics, but I religiously read Sonic the Hedgehog back in the day.
Oh right.
But I have some experience with X-Men and Spider-Man through video games mostly.
Mm.
But so here's the breakdown of the business model problem. Here's the question you have to ask yourself, and a lot of this is precipitated by this one professional in the comic books industry who I don't remember his name, but he's the person who came up with Power Girl, I believe it is. And
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
he and it's going to be a weird assertion from him because he's the person who came up with Power Girl, the superhero with the boob window, but
Yeah.
he was talking about how it's very good that we're calling out all the sexism and misogyny and whatnot in American comics, but check out what manga is doing. And he posted a screenshot of the cover of some manga that I've never heard of personally.
Yeah.
That was like it was your average like seinen ecchi manga cover, chick with big boobs and a skimpy outfit.
Yeah.
So
So something that's niche here, but
exactly,
not exactly the thing that
not the thing that's outselling American comic books at scale. So the person who came up with Power Girl has a problem with boobs, and my issue is, okay, here's the question you have to ask yourself if you're in the American comic books industry. How come uh, two questions. How come manga is able to generate successful new IP on a regular basis? Second question. How come even though our franchises are decades old, well loved franchises, have Hollywood movies that are making billions in the box office, we somehow can't translate that to new comic book sales? And you have to ask both of those questions to yourself before you get to shit on manga for being sexist or whatnot. And
Well,
that's where it
um,
comes down to a business model for me. Because
yeah.
here's the issue. You're looking at the manga industry versus the comic book industry. You've got these properties that are, again, decades old, well loved. People know who Superman is. People know who Batman is. People know who the X-Men are. People know who Spider-Man is. And you're losing out to things like My Hero Academia and and Demon Slayer. Like, you're losing out to stuff that didn't exist a decade ago. And so how does manga manage to keep doing that? And the answer to that question is that they're constantly courting new talent all the time. So you're a manga publisher. You've got this magazine that you publish manga in, and you're constantly looking for the next big thing, because if you can find it before whoever your competitors are, then you get to reap those rewards. You get to reap those rewards. You get to get the money from the manga. You get to be part of the anime deal. You get to be part of the merchandising deal. You get to be part of all of that. So
Now
you're constantly putting
I
out
wanted to add. Oh, I'm
go.
sorry.
You're constantly putting out the call like, hey, if you're a talented artist and you have an idea, hit us up with it and we'll publish it and see how it does. And so they're doing that all the time, and of course that's going to result in a lot of one-offs that come out and then don't catch on and kind of fail. But there's no reason not to do that, because it's really no cost to you as the publisher, and you also get to be the person who put this new hit on. You get to be the people who put Demon Slayer on. You get to be the people who put My Hero Academia on. And that's very valuable, especially since you're part of the media publishing world. That's what you do.
I
Go
wanted to
for it,
touch
Vicky.
this thing. Burgermeister said. Um, a lot of Western comics are trying to be slice of life as well, to not so great success, to say it the least. Yeah, they're doing this weird thing where it's like, but the way that they're approaching it, which actually, again, that's not. It's not a thing that. It's not that it doesn't work. It can work. Having sort of take superheroes and sort of like approach it from the sort of slice of life aspect of it. That's not what the issue is. Of course, the issue is that they're doing it from a sort of we've all seen the "I'm Not Starfire" if you've seen the cover for that,
Yeah. Well,
and
so
it's like, whoa, what the fuck?
so that
And it's funny. There's nothing wrong with the sort of. I'm gonna come up with a comic about a gloomy, chubby goth girl. It's like, okay, that's fine, but it's the way you're doing it. It's the disingenuous way you're doing it.
disingenuous.
Disingenuous, yeah.
So here's the thing. My question is, okay, they're gonna try and do the slice of life thing with superheroes. Why is it they have to tie it in to the DC Teen Titans thing, why can't this person just be the kind of gloomy goth daughter of a superhero? Why does this person have to be the gloomy goth daughter of Starfire? And what I feel like it is you've got the comic book industry trying to be everything to everybody
Yeah.
because
Oh,
they don't have
that's
an
another big issue.
infrastructure for entirely original things to gain success.
Yeah, they
Because
don't
it's
want to
just not like
try.
it's not set up that way.
No.
Like you it is as I understand it, it is incredibly difficult to just be a talented artist and end up in the comic book industry. And further from that, be a talented artist with an original idea and end up in the comic book industry and have your work published. Manga industry, that can happen,
Yeah.
not comics.
Two things I wanted to point out. First off is, of course, we know that how there's a big sort of almost symbiotic relationship between publishers and fans, where um, the fans know, the publishers know not to necessarily give in to the fans' demands, but they've gauged it so well. Now I'm talking about the manga side
Yeah,
in the industry, um, and back forth, and then the fans support the publishers by buying the stuff and all that.
well, yeah, they have very talented marketers. So like it's this thing where people will get angry if something they don't like is marketed well, and that's what I feel like is going on from with the comic books industry throwing shade at the manga industry. Is okay, this you disagree with it, you don't like it, and that's cool in the gang, but you're upset that it's very well marketed, and that's that's kind of that's weak. That's weak to me because
Well,
the
I think they don't
solution
even know
is
how it's marketed. That's the other thing is
well
there just you
exactly.
know nobody's explained to him. Well, this is how manga is marketed in Japan. This is how and this is why these things become super successful.
Well, part of
Uh,
the issue is that if these people had talented marketers working for them, they probably wouldn't be going down the road that they're going in the comic book industry. Because the marketers would step in and say, "Hang on, who do we expect to read this?"
yeah, I feel like there's nobody to sort of at the stop at the gate to say to sort of like do one final check of like um of this is this something that we really want to put out there that because again who is a lot of this stuff for? It's so unmarketable to the majority of people that bought comics.
Exactly.
Now
And
the
so
other issue,
go for it.
okay, the other issue I wanted to talk about is we actually used to be a really big IP creating machine.
Yes.
In the 80s and somewhat in the 90s, we were coming out with just constantly like new IP creation. A lot of it was in cartoons,
Yep.
toys, and whatnot. Again, the sort of symbiotic relation of I know again I know a lot of people have a sort of cynical view about that today about like the whole um they were putting this out to sell toys and such, and it's like you're approaching it from a very cynical point, and you're not really thinking about how that was actually sort of beneficial to IP creation.
Yeah, the fact that they were putting out stuff to sell toys is why that stuff was good.
Yeah,
Because if it wasn't
that
good,
was
it wouldn't have sold any toys, and they wouldn't have continued with it.
yeah. And some stuff was actually sort of toys only came out because of the popularity, not necessarily the show itself. Uh, One of the factors was again Ronald Reagan's children action thing that he sort of disbanded because his thing was the free market. Let the free market decide,
Yeah, and so
which is what I feel like should happen again. But modern day Karens would complain, like, why are you marketing this thing to my kids that I can't parent? Yeah, that because that's another thing. That's like what happened to the Saturday morning cartoons, and yes, of course, there's the internet and all that and video games, but really it was because the parents won. The parents complained and the parents won. That's why.
yeah, and
And I've heard this as the main reason.
so even with our existing IP, the fact that Marvel movies aren't translating to comic book sales, that should be a that should ring off alarm bells on anyone with a brain when we're comparing the manga industry to the comics industry. Because here, the manga industry, when an anime gets made of a manga, that
Yeah.
usually means that the manga is gonna sell more. And we know
Well,
that
I
because that's
think.
the entire reason that they make an anime in the first place, is to market the manga.
Hmm.
So they need to figure out, okay, why is it that when they make an anime, spending orders of magnitude less money to make that anime than to create one of these blockbuster movies, by the way. So they spend less money to make this anime, and it translates to higher sales of the manga, but spending more money to make a high budget movie, worldwide global success, billions in the box office, does not translate to more comic sales. And I
Well,
think part of
I
it
have a
is
theory on
because
that.
the part of it is because a the dynamic between manga and anime kind of selects for the kind of person who is likely to latch onto an IP very hard like that. Whereas when you're talking a Marvel movie that's marketed to like your average person walking the street who otherwise
Yeah.
would not be caught dead reading comics, but goes to see Avengers and Justice League and all these because they like movies. They like watching movies, and they like watching the hottest movie that's out. So
Mm.
they're gonna they're gonna see the movie, but they're not gonna buy your comic book. And then two, because your comic books aren't even marketed toward the people who are likely to read comic books, who are likely to latch on to that IP at that level, because they're taking it and they're doing weird stuff with the IP when a, a, a lot of the problem that people are having is that they're doing these weird things to existing IP. And I think part of the reason behind that is because they know the people making these decisions know that none of these ideas would work at all if they were original IP. So they do it to existing
Mm.
IP to kind of ride that popularity. But it doesn't work that
Right.
way either, because people are going to pick it up and say, "What the hell is this? What are they doing to this thing that I'm already very familiar with?" And so they don't buy it.
Well, something else I was thinking of. It's like it's like My Hero Academia or Demon Slayer popular. Okay, well, and I could go now that I finished the anime, I could go and pick up the manga in the meanwhile. Let's start from the beginning.
Yeah,
how are you gonna do that with a if you wanted to start at the beginning from like the Avengers? Would you have to like go, decades past? Would you have to go to like uh where in other words, there's no starting point for the comic book.
Exactly.
There's nothing to go back and sort of um like I want to see how this thing started with. Well, okay, would you what? Would you go back to whenever the original? Would you go back to
Yeah, you're gonna
at
go
what
back to
point?
issue number 1 of whatever. You're
Yeah,
gonna go back to
yeah,
like Detective Comics issue 1, and good luck doing that, because then you're talking about, okay, well, you're gonna go try and get that on eBay or some shit. Because what, you're gonna find that in the Borders? You're probably not. The Borders, the Barnes and Noble, you're probably not.
yeah. Well, that was another thing that the manga. This was a sort of long time coming, ever since the '90s. Was the sort of when the comic industry became a sort of spectator industry of when it became less about selling comics for the reading aspect and more about um, we're putting out comics so for people to collect them and to
Oh, okay.
archive them,
You mean
and they're
speculator
going to be
as
yeah,
opposed
the
to spectator.
speculator market.
Yeah,
They're
that's
going to
true.
be these things are going to be super valuable. All 5,000, all 50,000 issues or whatnot,
And I mean,
and
which is that's cool in the gang. I have no problem with that. The issue is that that leaves no way for the average consumer who's just getting into it to actually get in and follow these stories. Discounting the fact that, like, if you're just getting into it, you don't actually know if going all the way back to issue number 1 of whatever you're looking at, you're going back to Iron Man issue number 1 is gonna like help you get into Iron Man. Not only are you going decades in the past, there it goes all over the place. There's different universes and this and that. Like, I know, like 10 years ago, DC did the New 52, where they just
oh yeah, I remember
rebooted
that.
like all of their franchises.
Yeah, and they already did that. And I remember they. Well, I read about it, and I don't actually remember it, but they did that in like 1986 also.
Yeah, so like they'll do these things multiple times, which is something I again, I have no problem with. I think it's good to do that. What I don't think is good is that none of these storylines and none of these things ever end. Like, there's very few like superhero franchises that have a beginning and have an end. Because again,
Yeah.
these
Oh
these are
God. Yeah.
decades
There's.
long. These are decades old IPs. They These are things that keep going, get revamped, get reimagined. They have individual storylines in interspersed between. It's like they're like the storylines are like shonen fighting anime movies, where it's like,
Yeah.
okay,
They.
they it's this self-contained little thing that can kind of happen in any in any between any two episodes of the anime, but that
Right.
you can take something like Demon Slayer, even these long-running shonen fighting anime, shonen fighting manga, they have ends. You can take you can read Naruto from the beginning to the end.
And these things are going to end at
Yeah.
some point. Yeah. Even the long running shonen stuff.
So
That at one point is going to end.
like you can read, and some of these things are very short. You can read Fully Cooley from the beginning to the end in like 3 hours maybe. You can, some of them are very long. You can read Ranma one half from the beginning to the end, and
Yeah.
that's it. The way that comic books are marketed from the major, like from the auxiliary media to the source material isn't conducive to isn't conducive to taking the the thing and going back and actually consuming the source material.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, I gotta read this in the.
there's no way to go from okay, I watched Iron Man, now I'm gonna read Iron Man without picking up in the middle of something or without actually not knowing where you're at with it.
Also, changing was it's sort of like doing these weird things where it's like, I'm gonna change the race of Iron Man or whatnot or Superman. It
Yeah, and
doesn't
there's that too.
it yeah, it doesn't do any favors. All you're doing is creating a weird continuity reboot
You know what it
that
is, and I this is gonna sound like a weird point, but keep with me for a bit. You know what it is? It's kind of like gatekeeping.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
okay, I'm gonna, I want to get into Iron Man. Where do I start? And who can tell you? And it's not the kind of thing that you can really figure out for yourself if you're just trying to get into it. Whereas if you just watched Demon Slayer and you want to get into the manga, it's really easy. And that goes for like all of otaku media. Anything that's based off of a thing is okay. I really like the anime for Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai. What's next? Oh, okay, I'm gonna buy volume one of the light novel, or I'm gonna buy volume one of the manga. It's really easy to get into it, and that's kind of what I'm saying with regards to anime versus these Marvel movies. Is that anime selects for the kind of person, and the entire industry is set up this way because anime is basically a long form, highly creative commercial for the manga or the light novel or the visual novel or the game, whatever, what have you. Because it's set up that way, everything is meant to be very streamlined. Okay, I liked I liked Fate Stay Night. What the anime? What am I gonna do next? Okay, I'm gonna play the visual novel. All right, what next? Well, they got the new anime that's coming out based on the other route of the visual novel. Okay, I'm gonna watch that next. Okay, well now they got these figures coming out of these characters. Oh well, I really like Saber. I'm gonna buy like 17 different Saber figures. Spend fucking $3,000 buying all these Saber figures. Okay, what next?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
all very streamlined. There's some aspects of superhero comics that are streamlined. Don't get me wrong. Okay, I really like Superman or you know here's the tweet that accompanied the announcement on Twitter of this podcast. Okay, I really like Wonder Woman. What next? Well, Kotobukiya has this really nice like model kit of Wonder Woman, designed by the same guy who did Strike Witches. Okay, I'm gonna pick that up because I really like Wonder Woman, and somehow the Strike Witches guy's design really work with that. But or like I really like Superman. I'm gonna get the Superman like highly detailed figurine that's $200 or some shit. Like there are some aspects of superhero media that are that streamlined, but the it has to it has to appeal to the kind of person that's going to get into the media at that level, and that's not what comics is doing currently because the people running that industry are it's not like the manga industry where it's like, okay, what's the next big hit? Is this the next big hit? Is this one's not doing well? Okay, let's drop that and move on to the next thing. They're always looking for the next big hit because they're trying to make a whole lot of money doing manga. And then
Yeah.
it's okay. This thing really hit. What are we gonna do next? Well, let's team up with this company and this company and this company and this TV station and this music company and make an anime of it. Why are we making an anime? So we can sell more of the manga.
Yeah, there was the thing about also there was the thing about like a few weeks ago about um, Rumiko Takahashi's work schedule, where she's like almost 70, but still works
Yo,
on her
for,
manga very hard.
yeah, for
And
like anyone in the comic book industry, do not let Rumiko Takahashi outwork you. Or like if you're not working as hard as she is, what are you doing?
well, so yeah, that's the other thing. Some of the most successful manga are also like the ones that are like working the hardest.
Yeah.
There's her, Ichiro Oda, I know. Before he died, the Berserk guy,
Yep.
he worked hard.
And I mean, here's another thing that I found actually really interesting. Evidently, when you're in the manga industry, you're a mangaka, you own the copyright to your work. It's not the publishing company.
Mm.
So there's people who are coming into the comic book industry writing on these IPs that aren't theirs. So there's an argument to be made that okay, well if I'm just bringing on to write Superman, it's not mine, but how can I make sure people know that it's me writing Superman?
So is that why we get Starfire's daughter?
That might be why we get Starfire's daughter. That might be an element of why we get Starfire's daughter because you don't own if you don't own the IP you're working for, and you have a desire to be known for to be a like a commodity, to be, or not so much a commodity, but to be well known inside that industry. How are you going to make yourself well known if you can't do that by associating that IP with you, by if you can't do that by making something that is original?
I actually have a very sort of um it's almost like black pill level of like why they're doing this, and it's coming from like a more sort of Marxist level of like destroy the old, reinvent it new type of thing.
I mean that
And I wonder if there's an aspect to that maybe on some of the, not maybe not at the low level, but at the high level, and I don't know if that's what's going on.
I think at the high level people just do not care about appealing to at the high level of the comic books industry. People just do not care about appealing to people who are actually buying comic books. Because here's the thing: at the high level of the comic books industry, at the level where you're controlling that IP, does it really matter to you if the actual comic book, the physical thing, if does it really matter to you if that's selling when you're also making billions in the box office off of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? If you're also making billions in the box office off of the DC Cinematic Universe, if you're making billions in the box office off of these properties, go like off of selling this property or licensing this property to Netflix and whatnot, does it really matter how much money you're making off of the comic book if you're making all this money off of just owning this IP? Like if you own Marvel, you are set. You don't really have to do anything other than let X, Y, and Z have these properties, or you don't really have to do anything except create these movies.
I want to read this comment from Burgermeister.
Go for it.
Raging Golden Eagle did say before that a lot of current year Western media for younger artists has made the appeal to parents first before appealing to kids. Yeah, they're doing a lot of that. That's just the nostalgia baiting. It's like that right now
Hmm.
because it's been a big sort of comeback as far as um, toys and media. Masters of the Universe. They
Yep.
have like not one but two cartoons coming out. One is being done by Kevin Smith, and it's been sort of found out through past tweets that he or no interviews that he never actually cared about that. but because he's like the sort of go-to enthusiastic like nerd guy, that he's the one that they put him in charge to sort of that on the face of it,
Yeah,
if you know
yeah.
what I mean.
So you don't really need if you didn't create the IP, you don't really need to care about it, even if you're put on the IP. What you end up caring about is making sure people know that you're the one who is
Mm.
who is doing this IP this time.
Yeah, that was also the same thing that happened with the Thundercats cartoon, Thundercats Roar.
Yep.
That was the same exact thing, and they said in the promo video, like, "Oh, I never actually cared for the original cartoon. It
Yeah.
was silly anyway."
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah,
Yeah. Nobody getting put on these properties actually really cares about them intrinsically, as like they don't care about them intrinsically as much as they would care about something that they made originally by themselves.
but see, that's the thing. What's keeping them from inventing the new IP? And there needs to be a way for people to sort of come up with new IP. I don't
And
care if
that's
the
the
IP
issue is
sucks or not.
that's the
Sucks
issue
or
is
not.
that there's no infrastructure in the especially not in the Western comics industry for that to happen. Well, and like the comics industry is like the lowest level of that because there don't get me wrong, there are plenty of indie comics that are highly original. There's plenty of outside of the Marvel paradigm and the DC paradigm. There's plenty of
Oh, that's
offbeat
what if you
comics
ever heard
that
his
are
name, Ethan Van Sciver.
Ethan Van Sciver. Yep,
Yeah, he makes it, and his whole thing's like the number one independent comic thing.
yep,
Even though, like I'm not personally interested in it per se, but I do sort of applaud people sort of going independent.
yeah, and
When
that's kind of the issue that with Marvel and DC is that they their control of the industry, and I don't think it's gonna really last forever.
no,
Outside of them creating the the cinematic universes and whatnot, I think comics is gonna like that's gonna become dominated by indie stuff. Is gonna be a little bit of market share here, a little bit of market share there. But the issue really is,
yeah,
and comics is the lowest level of this, is that there really isn't any infrastructure for people who have original ideas to get into the establishment industry like there is in manga. So like if you're in manga, you can be one of these people selling dojins at comic market, and
yeah.
off of that, like off of you'll do that for a while, and then you'll become
Drawing porn is low level.
yeah.
Drawing fan porn is apparently that's a bad thing.
I mean that's kind of the one of the things that's probably holding the Western industry back. But so you'll be at Comic-Con selling these dojins, and then you'll make your way into the manga industry because you have that you're known for making these dojins. You have that talent, obviously, if you're selling a lot of them at comic market.
Mm.
So you when you get yourself into the when you come to the to whoever's the publishing the manga, when you come to them
Mm.
and say, okay, I got this idea,
Mm.
they'll give you a few chapters, and if that catches on, you're in the manga industry. Congratulations. Off of you don't need to know anybody. You don't need to already be embedded it. You don't need to get in at a low level. You can be a talented artist and make your way into the industry
It's
because
just
there's an
easier. The
infrastructure
barrier
there.
of entry is just easier to get into in the industry versus where
Exactly.
here it's all about who you know.
Exactly.
What's that word when you know someone
Nepotism.
and you get in? Nepotism. That's it.
So you can get that way in the manga industry, but not in the comic book industry. There's no infrastructure for just straight up a talented artist to get into the industry on an original IP. And bonus, if you're in the manga industry, you still own that IP. So you're you're now further invested in it
I
because
gotta
it's
tell. Oh
yours.
no, I'm sorry.
You're not you don't you don't feel the need to mess with the vision of this thing because it's always been your vision.
Mm,
Whereas if you're in the comic book industry, okay, you've networked, you've gone to conventions and you've made connections and this and that. Okay, now you're in this industry at a low level and you work your way up from there. Okay, now you're put on the new Spider-Man project or whatnot. It,
mm.
and maybe you have some love for Spider-Man. Maybe you read those comics as a kid. Maybe you played like Spider-Man, like
Maybe you've seen the
Spider-Man
Japanese
2,
Spider-Man.
well, Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro on the PlayStation 1 back when you were little or some shit. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe you don't have any like long-standing love for Spider-Man, or maybe your experience with Spider-Man was one of these modern superhero comics where they're doing a lot of political stuff. So maybe that's your experience. Maybe that's your love for Spider-Man. So now you're getting put on this project that you have no connection to, that you have no no love for as it was created, and your experience with it was this politicized version of it.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do to make it yours, to make sure people know you're the person who did that? You're going to put your own spin on it, and for better or worse. But the reason that's permitted to happen is A, there is no infrastructure to be constantly courting new talent in the comic books industry. B, there is no there is no link between having a successful IP and having a successful comic book. C, when people come into the industry, they're put on projects that they don't own, and if you don't own the intellect, if it's not your vision, if it's not something you made, there is little motivation to stay faithful to the original vision of something that was created decades ago, by the way. So you have all these lower barriers to entry and these freedoms in the manga industry that you aren't afforded in the comic book industry. And then we wonder how manga is able to generate successful new IP regularly. Like all the most popular manga now, well, almost all of them, didn't exist 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Whereas all of the biggest superhero IPs have been around for decades. It's like BattleTech. Like every battle mech is like 300 years old and is just this jury rigged pile of garbage that barely works. That's kind of like what superhero comics is now. Everything is decades
Although,
old. It's got bits and pieces of this and that in it to kind of bring it up to replace what doesn't work and like bring it up to speed, make sure it can still go. But it's still decades old. These are still old intellectual properties, whereas manga begins and ends, and because it can do that, because you're not trying to keep this thing running forever, because it can still do that, you get you get this motivation to always be looking for the next best thing,
the
always
only
be
stuff
looking for
that
the
seems to
freshest thing.
I want to just state real fast. The only stuff that seems to run forever It's the stuff that's not designed to have um a high level of like backstory.
Hmm.
Mostly a lot of children's stuff. Um, or there's stuff like Go-Go 13 that's still. I don't know if Go-Go 13 ended, but you know what I mean.
Well,
Or a lot
stuff
of
that's
children's
highly
stuff, or
episodic.
Doraemon. What?
Stuff that's highly episodic.
Yeah, highly episodic, and like other than the initial premise, you don't need to know about. Um, I've seen stuff like Doraemon's a good
Well,
example of
yeah,
something that's
that's something that manga and anime and otaku media in general is really good at that you don't see a lot of other types of media being good at is premise based IP. Like Lupin the Third is premise based.
yeah,
You've
yeah.
got
That's another one.
you've got
But,
this group of people and they're going on hijinks and it's literally what Lupin the Third is. It can be anything. That's why it can cross over with Detective Conan because what story is Detective Conan disrupting in Lupin the Third? There isn't any.
no,
It's just
it's
you got a group of
Pokemon is
main
like that
character going
also.
exact Pokemon's the same thing. It's these you're and don't get me wrong because superhero comics do plenty of crossovers, but it's always in service to a greater storyline, and that's another
Yeah,
reason it's difficult to get into because you can watch basically any Lupin the Third anime and you know what it's about. You're not gonna miss anything substantial about Lupin the Third by getting into it on a later anime.
no,
You can argue quality, but you're not missing a crucial storyline. It's not like Gundam, where if you jump in at like double Zeta, you're not gonna understand what's going on.
yeah. That's what I've heard. Like from some people, like the barrier to get into Gundam's much harder, particularly UC stuff, but not
It's not
really.
hard. Watch. Okay, uh, as an aside, I'm gonna give you all the secret. You ready for this? I don't think you're ready for this. You need to. This is the gnosis. Ready?
Yes.
If you want to get into a long running like anime franchise, here's how you do it. Watch everything in the order it was released.
Yeah.
Will you ever go horribly wrong doing that?
Um. There's a lot of people who sort of, and sometimes I'm guilty of this, but not as bad as other people. They'll take one look at like first Gundam and it's like, oh, that looks old, or even like maybe like Zeta now.
I
It's
mean,
like, ew, that looks old.
that's fine if they believe that if that's their
Mm,
like if that's their gripe with it, but don't then ask me how to get into UC Gundam
yeah.
because you're looking for like the watch order, the instruction manual. Okay, watch this thing and then watch because they're trying to skip over stuff is what they're really asking
Yeah,
for.
I still say start with the compilation movie, and
The
then if you
compilation
really
movies are
like that,
perfectly acceptable.
yeah, and then go into the
Yeah,
series.
that is the
And
only
and,
acceptable compilation movie for Gundam.
yeah. Oh, I know.
But that's it. It's just it's it's never hard. Watch stuff in the order it came out. You will never go horribly wrong doing that. There you can make an argument that for some franchises, you you might be better served watching this one or watching or skipping over that one, but you will never go horribly wrong watching everything in the order
Oh,
it came out.
Burgermeister also says this, and this is a very good question. This applies to Monogatari and Fate 2
Yes.
for the more recent ones.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
actually. Like for Monogatari, just watch it the order that came out with.
There's no reason not to.
No, even if you get bored with the later ones, you'll at least say, the original Monogatari is still like a perfectly tight masterpiece.
Like, listen, I advocate watching the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya in broadcast order. Why not?
Mm.
If it bothers you, watch it twice or just watch it in chronological order. It really doesn't matter. But
No.
there's no like if you're asking me which order you should watch, which order do you watch stuff in? Watch it exactly how it came out on TV.
Mm.
Because when going through like if you were living in 1979 and Gundam came on TV and you watched Gundam on TV and then you watched Zeta Gundam on TV and then you watch Double Zeta Gundam on TV and then just watch it in the order it came out and you will miss nothing because that's how everyone who actually got into it at that point in time watched it.
Yeah.
It's not hard. And again, there
Yeah.
might be a better way to execute that. There might be there might be something you can skip over and not miss anything. There might be something you can like if you watch this before this, you get some more insight, but you will never go horribly wrong watching things in broadcast order. And to bring that back to the topic, sure, you can make the same argument with comic books. But the issue is that you're going back a much longer time, and these things are much more difficult to get a hold of if you're trying to go all the way back to like Superman issue number 1. It's that, and they did things like the New 52 where they did just like restart the entire thing. And not only that, but there's also the various side stories and alternate universes and like Scarlet Spider and Ben Reilly and shit, and that can get confusing for someone who's just coming into comic books off of, say, the MCU or the DC cinematic universe. But again, because otaku media and manga and anime and all of that stuff is designed as it's designed to be like marketing synergy. All this stuff markets into each other.
Yeah, even like stuff like the original Akira movie was just an advertisement for the manga.
Yep. It's meant to make you want all of this other stuff. It's meant to make you want to buy the manga. It's meant to make you want... Gundam is meant to make you want to buy the model kits. Like, Haruhi is meant to make you want to buy the light novel and the anime figures and the hug pillow cover and the shower curtain and all that shit. It's meant to make you want to buy a whole bunch of other stuff relating to this anime property. And the MCU isn't designed to do that. It's meant to make you want to watch the next movie, and that's basically it. Maybe meant to make you want, if you're like 7, maybe it's meant to make you want to buy the action figure of the character in the movie. It's not meant to make you want to buy the comic book. Which add that on to the reason why nobody in the comic book industry is motivated to do, like, to really get in deep with these characters as they were established. There's why there's a motivation to, okay, do your own thing with the characters, because nobody's expecting any of this to market into the movie, and nobody's expecting the movie to market into any of this. So if you're an artist and you're getting put on this IP that you don't own and you don't really have any big connection to, because it ain't yours, why not do your own thing with it? Just to put your mark on it. I get the motivation. I think it sucks. I think it's bad marketing. I think it's a massive symptom of a broken business model in comic books. But I get it. I wish these people were motivated and empowered to create original IP with their ideas. I'm certain that maybe they would be able to find a market for it. I don't know. But that's another thing that manga certainly has going for it, is there's really a manga for everyone. You can
That
find
too. Something else I wanted to touch on,
go for it.
and I think because I've said this once before, is um, Japanese stuff seems just better at letting you world build and sort of like you can add to the world building of things. Yeah, and I said you can even extend that to like Gundam, where it's like you can add to the lore.
So I think comics also, to be certainly fair, I think comics also does this pretty well, because you can add to the lore of something like X-Men is open enough to where you can add to it and it's not a problem. Like and you can do like crossover things with, so like back in the day, I used to play like Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro on the PlayStation, and all the training missions would take place in the X-Men Danger Room, and you'd be guided
Uh,
by like Professor X and Jean Grey, and they'll be walking you through the controls and shit. But the kind it's tough to say. It's tough to put my finger on. But the way anime does it leaves it open to, you can you can do things with anime like, okay, uh Mobile Suit Gundam, we're going to take a look at this specific theater of war within the 1 year war, and then we get 8th MS team. Okay, well, what was Xeon doing back when, in the in between period during first Gundam and Zeta Gundam, and then we get 0083. Oh, okay. Well, what was going on in like side 6 when back there, like at the very tail end of the 1 year war? Oh, okay, that's 008. That's 0080. You can create these little side stories. You in like Strike Witches does the exact same thing. Like, okay, so here's like the English channel, and we're gonna follow the team of witches that are doing that. Okay, now we're in like the the Nordic countries and up near the border of Russia and whatnot. Okay, what are the witches over there doing? So you can create these universes and have things happen in these universes. And so Macross, you can do that. Okay, well, what happened after SDF Macross in this like remote part of space that's been colonized? Okay, then you get Macross Plus, and part of the reason anime is conducive to that is that's how they do the decades old franchise thing, is that they keep adding to it and sort of reinventing it in a modern way. And you're not following the same characters, you're not following the same conflicts, but it's still within the same universe. Like that would be if Marvel did X-Men and then like all of the X-Men retired, and
mm.
that's like the next generation of X-Men, and
Well, they
did
used
that
to do
like
that.
did well if that'd be like if they did that 7 times, because then it'd be because that'd be like, okay, well, it's Mobile Suit Gundam, okay, now it's Zeta Gundam, we're following, there's some characters from the first show, but we're following a new cast of characters. Some people are like, oh, well, Char, this Quattro guy is really suspicious. I don't know. And then we get into Double Zeta. Okay, well, we're following this new band of children. Okay, well, now Char's counterattack. Okay, the dude's throwing asteroids at Earth now. It's different conflicts, but there are common elements and especially themes going throughout the storylines that connect them all in the same universe. Okay, well, if we're making a Gundam anime, what do we need to have in common for it to be recognizable as a Gundam anime. Okay, we need the space element, we need the we need Minovsky particles, we need mobile suits.
Lickable pussy.
We if you're Tomino, that's what you really care about. We need to have some sort of, and not every Gundam anime, but most of the TV anime have this, and a lot of the stuff that continues off of the TV anime, like Unicorn. We need to
Yeah,
have
yeah.
this conflict between not not
A
the ex
non-soldier teenager finding a Gundam
yeah
that's
it's
thrust into the war.
it's the war is a backdrop for this conflict between children and adults, where are the children are made to act as pawns for the adults, and the story explores the
Oh,
various
that's such a
shades of
Tomino thing. Yeah.
exactly, like the various shades of evil that are involved with that on both sides of the war, regardless of whether you're Federation or Xeon or and whatnot. And a lot of Gundam anime, not even inside the UC, kind of has an element of that. So you can create a world that's not necessarily a storyline. And again, there are shades of this in comics, but I see it happening a lot more in anime. And again, because that's something that's conducive to the medium in anime and manga. That's something that's conducive to the medium because it's created to market itself and market related media. So yeah, if you can create, okay, we made Mobile Suit Gundam. Okay, 10 years later, what are we going to do? We're going to make 0080. And it's more Mobile Suit Gundam, but it's basically entirely different. But it's still related in that it's within the same world, it's within the same universe. It has similar themes. You're going to recognize it as a Gundam anime, even if none of the original characters are even involved. Even if none of the original creators are involved. So you can make it. We can make a Gundam anime. We don't need Okawara to do the mecha designs. We can have Hajime Kotoki do the mecha designs. As long as it fits inside the universe, we can do that.
Okay.
And so, and again, comics does this too, where they have various artists doing the superhero comics, but it's not meant to market into other things. This is what people need to realize about otaku media, about anime, about manga, about light novels, about visual novels. Everything is marketing. It's like that meme where the astronauts looking up at the Earth and saying, oh, it's all marketing, and the astronaut with the gun is standing behind him and says, always has been.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all marketing. It always has been marketing. If you're trying to do this media thing and you don't understand marketing, you're running massive game on yourself, and running massive game on your industry. This is what upset me about when that comic book guy, the Power Girl creator, went after manga. It's like, oh, you clearly don't you don't get it. You don't understand why this stuff is popular. You don't understand why it's doing better than what your industry is putting out. But you're throwing shade at it because you're upset that it's well marketed. And you're doing a massive disservice to not only yourself, but your entire medium and your entire industry by focusing on, well, this one manga cover has boobs on it, so we have to go after manga. Number one, it's not going to work. It's like I always say, don't battle the people who habitually spend hundreds of dollars on cute anime girl shit. Doesn't work. You're not gonna that you're not gonna win that battle. And don't get mad when something you don't like is marketed well. The only thing that means, Literally, the only thing that means is that you need to get better at your marketing. You need to, and failing that, you need to create a product that other people actually want. But I,
Well,
I
most
would
of these people aren't capitalist
oh,
either.
I would argue
They're
that
not
there.
actually.
Like, that's the thing is where
It,
in the question is where are all the capitalists in the comic book industry? And I would argue that number one, the core problem is not that there aren't any capitalists in the comic book industry. The core problem is that there is no infrastructure to allow a massive diversity of people into the comic book industry, into the establishment comic book industry, by the way. Because you can get into the establishment manga industry just by being a talented artist, regardless of who you know, regardless of whatever your stance is on this or that issue, regardless of your skin color, regardless of your background on any level. If you're a
yeah.
talented artist, you can make it into the manga industry, not knowing anybody. Not true of the comic books industry. And that's if if that's true of your industry, that's number one to investigate before you start throwing shade at manga for really when you're picking out the big titties manga cover and saying, oh well, this is a problem. What you're really doing is throwing shade at manga for having a diversity of subject matter. Because that's one manga. You can go challenge any of these people having a problem with the big titty manga cover. Go to your local bookstore, walk past the 2 shelves of comic books toward the 13 shelves of manga, and pick out like 20 at random. Put a blindfold on and pick out like 20 at random. Number one, you're going to end up with like 3 different volumes of My Hero Academia and like 2 volumes of different Attack on Titan manga, because those are just massive franchises. So if you're throwing shade at manga, I wonder why you're picking out the big titty, which is probably shrink wrapped, by the way. You picking out that one instead of some of the most popular ones, the ones that are actually outselling comics. But that's beside the
Yeah.
point. Pick out 20 different manga and see what kind of diversity of subject matter you're gonna get, because there's a lot. Fuck it, like I the shelf is kind of out of my view now, but like there's just I picked up, and I told you guys about this. I picked up a manga that's a 4 coma about different typefaces, fonts, Helvetica, Arial, Comic Sans, like Times New Roman, that kind of shit.
Mm.
You can that can happen in the manga industry. Like Land of the Rising Dead or whatever it is, the zombie survival guide manga can happen in the manga industry. Like, let me turn on the light here and take a look. Like Kujibiki Unbalance.
Oh, I remember that.
Kujibiki Unbalance, the manga based off of a fake anime from a real manga.
Yeah, yeah. From Genshiken.
Right, it's these sort like Hanayuko Maid Team, and these are all like very different things that can only happen in the manga industry because there's a barrier to entry low enough that basically anyone who's talented can have a shot at having something that's it's at least a moderate hit that at least resonates enough with some subsection of people that the magazine will keep them around.
I wanted to say that I told you the story about when I was in art school, and they were telling me like Well, manga's just a fad. This was in the 2000 early to mid 2000s, by the way.
Yeah, I would find each and every one of those people and just send them a panoramic video of the entire manga section of the bookstore with a backdrop of me laughing.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they know now that manga's far more successful, but not that I would want to be there right now
Well,
anyway.
it and listen, I can get thinking manga is a fat. Well, I you know what? That's not even true.
No.
I could you look at the kind of popularity that manga had back in the day when it was like when first of all when it was Borders, and second of all when the problem was young teenagers literally sitting in the manga section of the Borders books reading manga.
Oh, the manga cows.
Yeah,
I used to heard they'd be called because they would just sit there like grazing.
yeah, exactly. And that's the way they would read manga. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, is there any other type of book, especially even discounting like the like graphic novel sort of thing that manga and comics and like Western graphic novels fall under? Is there any other kind of book that you see that sort of thing happening in the bookstore at scale like that?
Nope.
Exactly. So in there was
And
something.
the people still buy them anyway.
Yes, people still be up on Twitter posting their shelves full of manga,
Yeah.
and
Truthfully, I buy anime way more than manga, but I still do. You know,
I
there's something.
and this is anecdotal, but one of the reasons I like manga is that you will sometimes get these short series or these one-offs like Count Fujiwara's Suffering. Okay, it's a manga about the thoughts of a cat as he's living with some neat and some siscon, and
That sounds great.
that's the premise. It's like, okay, we're gonna make a, and it's not even like multiple volumes. It's just one omnibus tankobon of all the chapters, and it's like, okay, we can release this as a thing, and it'll sell. I bought it at least. But one thing I like about manga is that you can get these short series, and it starts and then it ends, and you're all set.
The cat must be like, let me guess, he's masturbating again.
Well, it's not it's two girls.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let me guess, they're they're masturbating again.
But it's like you can like this, you can get these contained stories in mainstream manga, like establishment manga, published by like major establishment publishers manga. That's not so true of comic books.
Mm.
So you can consume something and then move on to the next thing, and you don't need to be latched on to this franchise forever. You don't need to be like following issue by issue along with this particular franchise. And, and especially if we're talking about in the US market.
Mm.
Cuz like the way manga is released in Japan is a lot of it is through magazines. So you are following this thing chapter to chapter. But another thing with the
Yeah,
magazine,
you're buying the giant. What is it? The the big imprint,
yeah, you're
whatever.
buying like Shonen Jump or something. But and the other thing with this magazine business model is that so you're buying Shonen Jump for whatever is in Shonen Jump that you like, but you also might check out some of the other things that are in that magazine, and you might latch onto those things as well. So you get this, you're getting cross sold with okay, you like manga X, but you might catch a little bit of this chapter of manga Y, and you're like, oh well, this is kind of interesting, and then you might take a look at manga Z and say, oh, you know what, I might check this one out. You're getting cross marketed with all these things simply by virtue of the manga you like being in a particular magazine. Like these things are in the same magazine issue as the manga you like, so you check it out. The Western Comics doesn't have a business model like that. You're buying issue X of property Y, and that's basically it. You might, you might, there might be some kind of crossover where where a character appears in it, or like they might reference something that happens in another comic book franchise, and like I see this sometimes. They did with this with the Sonic the Hedgehog comic sometimes, where they'll reference something that happened, and then they'll put a little asterisk, and in a footnote they'll have like Knuckles the Echidna issue XYZ.
Mm.
And so you might, from that, maybe you might go through the effort of tracking down Knuckles the Echidna issue 12 and then reading on from there. But
Oh,
only if you're that kind, like I was that kind of guy with Sonic the Hedgehog. Like I went in the back of the shit. I checked the little boxes. Okay, well I want the Sally Acorn miniseries. I want the fucking Sonic Kids special. I want the Sonic Kids 2 special and all that shit. I was that guy with Sonic the Hedgehog. But not everyone is gonna be that guy, and it's not easy to be that guy.
mm.
Not with comic books, at least.
Another comment here. Do anime licensing companies had a bubble burst in the late 2000s? People blame this on Moe, but honestly, looking at this context, I don't think so. No,
No,
it had
no,
nothing to do with that.
that's the it's that and piracy, which are the two dumbest arguments for why there was a bubble burst in the late 2000s in the U.S. marketing industry. Here's here are the things that coincided. Here's how that perfect storm happened. Okay, you had ADV et al. Who were all they were getting on this business model where that kind of Funimation is getting on as well, where they're trying to get basically as many licenses as possible. They're just licensing stuff, and this is also
Yeah, that what did one thing that was a big like thing was that Sojitz thing that like pulled out. It was like a Japanese licensing firm or something that had a whole bunch of like it was like 25 titles or something. It's like we'll give you these 25 titles or something, and then it like something pulled out or something happened where because I remember for a very, 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 very brief time, and they even put out one volume. ADV had the license to Gurren Lagann.
yep.
I remember that. Um, the only thing is, I remember that was part of that big licensing thing was, I think Panty Pony Dash was one of them.
Mm.
And I think the Guyver TV series. But yeah, for the most part, it was stuff that I didn't really care for anyway. But yeah, that was ADV's thing.
Yeah, so they were doing that, and there was also something happening around that time called the 2008 general financial collapse of the entire world. So
Right.
before we talk about Moe and piracy, we might want to address those two things before we blame Moe and piracy for the the market crash of anime around that time, because this is something that affected Japan as well, and
Yeah.
it's not like something that we were talking about several episodes ago where a contraction in the U.S. market or the overseas market generally caused much of the market to stagnate. this was there was a contraction in the overseas market and the whole rest of the market as well. So that I I I'm highly dubious about that particular about either piracy or moe in being to blame for anything going on there. It's a ridiculous argument to me. But yeah, that that's if you're looking to if you're actually looking to get the real the real dealio on what's going on, why manga is beating comic books so much. If you're focusing on the politics, you are only focusing on one symptom of a much greater problem, and that problem is that the business model is broken. And the business model is broken in a way that allows poor quality entertainment that people don't want to dominate the market, and not dominate the market from a consumer from like a consumer level, but to dominate the market in that is largely the only thing that's coming out.
Mm.
Because the only way something like that can dominate the market is if there's nothing out there to compete with it from the like the mainstream establishment industry.
Mm.
So the problem isn't the politics. The problem is the business model. And
Yeah.
the only reason the politics got as bad as they were is because there's no way for the market to correct for the industry producing things people don't want, like there is in manga. Because if you make a manga that people don't want, it's you're it's not gonna do very well. And the thing about the manga industry, and again, this is why a it's dubious as at best to cherry pick the manga cover with the titties on it and say, "Oh, the manga industry has so many problems." The thing about the manga industry is that it doesn't have to catch on with like the doesn't have to catch on with like the My Hero Academia crowd to catch on, so to speak. You you have to you can appeal to other other sectors of the manga market and still find success. You can still you're not going to get dropped from the magazine for appealing to a slightly different demographic.
By the way, if I was someone in Japan, I would probably be getting monthly one of the Manga Time Kirara books.
Mm.
That's where all the cute Moe 4 Coma things come out.
Yeah, and that's another thing is you have these magazines. There's one for every. There's at least one for every kind of reader. So you're more likely to find something you like if you're reading a magazine that already has something you do like in it, because all the
Yeah,
things are
it's
gonna be what really happens is all the things are they figured out that okay, we can market this to the kind of people who read this magazine because it's somewhat similar to this thing that other people who read this magazine really like. It's all marketing.
there's a great book. You gotta. I used to own the physical. Unfortunately, I don't anymore. I think you can know why. But you could get like um, scans of it.
Mm.
Look up. Even it was great. It was this thing during the manga boom in like the 2000s that got translated. It was made originally in the late 80s called "Even a Monkey Could Draw Manga."
Even a
It's
monkey
so
can draw.
good.
That's a great.
And
What a great title.
yeah,
Like
and it was talking about
unironically.
like how you can have the same premise, but depending in there were a whole bunch of great chapters, but there was one you can have the same initial premise, but depending on what like not Takuban, but what's the big collection like the imprint thing
Oh,
called?
anthology.
Yeah, like the anthology. Depending on what anthology is, it like changes the format. It changes like the genre or style, even
Hmm.
though it's like still the initial premise.
Yeah, I'll have to
And
check this out.
yeah, oh yeah. Even a monkey could draw manga. You got to find like the scans for that.
So
Great.
these are coming from the IRC, just comments from the IRC. So
Yeah.
they met, we mentioned that there are people sitting in front of the manga. There were people sitting in front of the manga shelves at shops reading, and apparently that still goes on to this day. And comics had that, but not anymore.
Mm.
And Burgermeister also comments, Western animation is the same way in a sense. Shows like Steven Universe and Netflix She-Ra have little appeal for kids and only really survive through older audiences. And this is something you brought up earlier, is that a lot of these shows don't seem to be like they're cartoons, but they're not cartoons like what you and I might have watched back in the day. Like there isn't, to my knowledge, there doesn't really exist a cartoon like Johnny Quest anymore. And
No.
maybe that's a like that might be a kind of a sign of the times. Like maybe that was a product of its time. But
The original or the 90s one?
I well the original one's like several it was like several decades old back back when I was a kid. But
Mm.
there was the 90s one, and then there was the Real Adventures of Johnny Quest, and that had like computer animation and shit, and that was like
Yeah.
late 90s, early 2000s, I think. But there there isn't anything that's like Thundercats or Johnny Quest
No,
or
all the action and adventure shows don't exist anymore.
exactly.
That's a
It nothing like that exists genuinely. You have things like the Venture Brothers, which is a parody of Johnny Quest.
yeah. That
You've
has to do because the the video games could sort of supplement that from what I've heard. Someone actually did a whole thing about that. I think it was Rebel Taxi about like why there's no more like action cartoons and no more Saturday morning cartoons, and that was pretty much is because uh that and action basically like the comic book movies
right.
sort of supplement that.
That makes sense.
Even though I
But
still say that they should be they should exist still, but
I think there can be room for that, but the nobody wants to go through the expense of creating something like that and not have it make back the massive expense it took to make that.
yeah.
Which if we're talking Western media versus Japanese media, it's another reason why anime can continue to create highly creative, not just new IP, but like m- much more varied subject matter and whatnot than Western cartoons, is because all of that risk is distributed,
Yeah,
and
make fun of it all you.
everything, like everything is known. Like everyone understands that this show might take years to break even, and they're okay with that
Mm.
because the risk is distributed, and investing they're investing in multiple different works at the same time anyway, and there are a lot of different revenue streams. So it's it's not a big deal to the companies making these anime, because they're not, if that thing doesn't do as well, they're not out several $1 million or however
Mm.
much however much it would be to make something like a modern original Thundercats or a modern original Johnny Quest, because
Yeah, well, there
there
was.
is room for it, but the industry doesn't want to take on that risk.
Yeah, well, there was well, a lot of people bring out the 2011 Thundercats, which um didn't act. It actually did do well, but it only lasted one season because I think it's because they didn't want it to do well. It wasn't what was in the. I know they say, oh, because, and they had a whole toy line by Bandai, and they pretty much went all out. But I think it's I think it was more because they didn't want it to do well for a lot of these things. Whenever they put like an action cartoon like that, they always put them on early in the morning because basically like the time nobody watches things.
Like that, and that does kind of get into like the philosophical, ideological sort of thing, where okay, they made a new Thundercats, and it's like the old Thundercats in that it's just a genuine action cartoon. In a genuine action cartoon, it's not trying to be subversive in this way or that way, and like that's the problem with it.
Yeah.
From an industry standpoint, that's the problem with it. From a philosophical, ideological standpoint, that's the problem with it. And this is all more from the IRC. Like 20 to 30 year olds barely watch TV in the first place, and yeah, a lot of these old cartoons were made to sell merchandise. So on some level, they're kind of trying to do the how I always say that Funimation is trying to do with anime something that anime isn't designed to do, which is sell the anime as a product. They're trying to sell the cartoon as a product when none of these cartoons were ever designed to sell the cartoon as a product.
Yeah, there's no product.
I feel like you if you're trying to do this, you need something to market. Like this is the issue. This is what kind of constantly annoys me about the anime discourse, is that the fact that this stuff is made to market other stuff is part of what makes it good. Because it has to be good, otherwise it's just shitty marketing for whatever they're trying to make. Like you
gotta get that X-arm Nendoroid.
I mean, I guess I don't want to be the people who have anything to do with X-arm as an IP. I don't want to be those people, because you're gonna have egg on your face for the rest of your career just off of that anime. And that's the thing, is that I because that was the paradigm back then, I'm not sure you could try to do something the same way without trying to market something off of it. I don't think you can sell these cartoons as standalone things. I don't think they were never designed to do that.
Yeah.
Like what action cartoon was designed to just be an action cartoon? Everything was made to sell toys. And like you certainly can't do toys anymore, but you can definitely find something else to market.
That could be a whole other show on itself. The utter complete clusterfuckery that is the Western toy industry in 2021. If I would love to talk to someone like Retro Blasting or something, because oh man, that is like chickens with their heads cut off, all running around at this point. It's terrible distribution, terrible QC, price increases, and I know COVID was a factor, but this was kind of like,
this is going on before COVID.
Yeah. Oh, well, certainly.
But yeah, so like, these are just more comments from the IRC. It's like, likely there are one or two cartoons that do great, and everyone just copies what works for 10 years or so. Adventure Time came out, and then how many cartoons were some level or another like Adventure Time.
Oh, that's another issue I have is, because for the longest time, people complain about anime looking the same. And it's like, have you taken a look at Western cartoons?
Yeah. Eh,
It really, I know I
But
don't
you know
like
what?
using the
Not
term
kind of not
Cal Arts.
even
What?
because kind of not even, but because if you go back to like the early 2000s, back in like the
Yeah.
cartoon era of Cartoon Network, a lot of those cartoons look wildly different from each other. Courage the Cowardly Dog, Cow and Chicken,
Oh,
Dexter's
I know.
Lab, Johnny Bravo. But that's kind of to your point is that they
I'm talking
all
about now. They look like
exactly.
they all those, and I don't like using the term Cal Arts because one, they don't all come from Cal Arts.
And a lot of the people who made those old cartoons did come from Cal Arts. So
Yeah,
it's not like it's the Cal Arts style, but it's just a particular kind of style that is it's it's often imitate elements large elements of it are often imitated in modern cartoons and it's noticeable.
yeah. Well, that's another thing is why is that particular style so prevalent and popular? And one of the things I came up with is because it's imitatable. It's
Mm,
it's really easy to emulatable. That's the word.
mm.
It's really easy to emulate. It's very hard to emulate anime characters. Despite I know people like, oh, it's really easy to draw anime characters. It's like you just draw big eyes and do that nose. It's actually a little bit more complex than that.
It's a little bit more
You know.
complex and like everyone you can it's to a point where you can tell a particular mangaka's style from how they do it and some anime looks like drastically different from other anime and you can tell just at a glance. But so that's that's sort of that's kind of the disconnect like between east and west. It's a disconnect of business model and that is the root where all the other problems stem from. If you want to fix the problem, you need to fix the business model behind Western media. And where that begins is there needs to be an infrastructure to get new talent into the established industry like at scale. Like it shouldn't matter at all anything else than is this person talented and can this person put out content on a regular basis. Whether or not that whether or not what they put out is like popular and catches on, that literally doesn't matter because if it's not popular, we can drop it and bring in the next person with their next IP. And if that catches on, that can be the new thing. But the issue is that we have this establishment industry and we have these established IPs that have been around for decades. And it's it creates a stagnation.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not the manga industry and the otaku media industry in general are highly dynamic, and the reason for that is because it's not hard for like someone at a low level to get into the industry. If you're a light novel author, especially in the last like 10-15 years in Japan, if you have a remotely interesting premise, you're published and you own your IP. You can't beat that. You really can't. You can't beat that. You can't beat that with okay. Well, we've been rehashing the same superheroes for 50 years. You will never beat getting the constant influx of new talent with well, we've been rehashing the same people for the past half century because there will always be people who are going to get tired of the same thing, and there are always going to be people who are looking for the next new thing. And not only that, if you can get the next new thing, then not only do you get new people on board with your thing, but you also get like you get like you get to get people, you get a cycle, you get new people, because there's always going to be churn. There's always going to be people who come in and people who leave.
Right.
When
That's
you
why
when you're able to
anime
generate new IP,
always.
you take advantage of that churn.
That's why anime and manga always looks different depending on the decade it comes out in, is because there's always new people coming in, and that's why you could tell why when a manga and anime comes out, just but knowing the particular art styles.
Yeah. So to close out,
Yeah.
look at the business model. Always look at the business model. Like not just when talking about this particular issue, but just generally. Look at the business model first and see if there are ways that see if there are bottlenecks where there only a little bit is allowed to, like only a few people are allowed to or permitted and empowered to contribute, because that's going to be where all of your problems with, oh well, comic books are, they're getting political, and they're all these comic book artists are doing weird things with the comic books. All of that stuff stems from the business model. Take a look at the differences between East and West as far as business models go, between comic books and manga, and that's where you're going to find why exactly manga has been outselling comic books. And that's the show. The email address is ntrradio@gmail.com. The website is ntrradio.net. Check out VZ's stuff at vzmk2, moe, and mechagatai.wordpress.com. His book is The Big Book of Idols. You can find that at thebigbookofIdols.com. My book is Otaku Entrepreneur. You can find that at otakuentrepreneur.com. If you click on the book link in the top right, that'll bring you there. Otaku Entrepreneur is where I talk about business and finance topics from an otaku perspective. That's otakuentrepreneur.com. I also run a yashike.moe. That's where I talk about lifestyle and self-development from an otaku perspective. That's yashike.moe. I sell half-naked anime girl figures at shinakiba.moe. I make drum and bass music at utamirecords.com. UTAMI records.com. On Twitter, I am at TAnubis. VZ is at VZMK2. The show is at NTR_radio. Check out the Bakagaijin Show, Otaku Midnight, Asobi FM, and the Geeky Panda stuff at thegeekypanda.net. All those are really good. I'm Tom Force Anubis.
And I'm VZ Mark II.
And even though we outsell comic books every time we say it, this is NTR Radio.